Hello and welcome to yet a very exciting episode of Eye on the Money, the television show that gives you insights into how to improve your financial well-being as well as make your money work for you. As usual, I'm your host Ingrid Nantege. Now, according to a 2019 financial sector deepening survey backed by the Central Bank of Kenya, 1 of every 5 borrowers in the country has defaulted on a loan in the past 1 year. The report also shows that affected are low-income households and employees whom the survey shows are living in a debt cycle. Equally, CBK data shows commercial banks had total outstanding loans of 2.7 trillion shillings as at the end of May this year, of which 430.1 billion was lent, to private households. The figures clearly point to a debt problem in the country. Today on the show, we shall be talking about how to avoid debt and get out of debt and remain debt-free. Joining me to break it all down, as usual, is financial coach and senior consultant at Money Clinic, Amos Ngahu. It's always a pleasure having you on the show, and I'm sure you already know this.
Thank you.
Thanks for always coming through.
Karibu.
Now we're going to talk about the elephant in the room.
Yeah.
Maybe it's not even an elephant anymore. But Amos, when we think about the figures, over the past 1 year, 1 of 5 Kenyans defaulted on a loan. I'll start by asking, how did we even get here? How did the country, or rather people, get to a point where they're taking out so much loans and are being in a position where they're even unable to pay? How are we in this situation?
Well, I'd say the very core of debt is a problem with budgeting. And we are living in a time whereby social media, we have to look good on social media. We have to look good, and people need to know where we are working. They need to know that we are earning money. And when it's not there, or when we feel we need to borrow, we are borrowing for the wrong reasons.
Wow.
And that's how we've gotten ourselves there.
So what you're saying, you started off by saying the very core of how we get into debt is poor budgeting.
Yes.
Which leads me into my next question. So what are you trying to suggest, Amos? Are you trying to say then that everyone who is in debt, it's because of poor personal finance, poor money management, or could it just be a situation where the economy is just not very favorable? The standard of living is high. I have to keep up. I have to eat. I have to put a roof over my head. I have to send my children to school. And somehow I can't make ends meet, of course, because of certain situations. Do I have to be a poor budgeter? Do I have to be a poor planner to be in debt?
It's a thin line, because like you're saying, the economy is, sometimes it can be very difficult. I have been in places where I've met people who actually don't have something to eat at that particular moment. This person has children, they have, the family is big, and they don't have any kind of income to feed their families. What I'm saying is the little money that comes away, because by the time I'm lending you money, I have actually analyzed that I have seen you have capacity to pay.
Right.
The challenge comes in if you want to borrow for consumption. And that's why now I'll go back to budgeting. Budgeting is actually a spending plan. You're spending what you have. You see, what debt does is that it allows you to spend money that you do not have. So you're actually working on the negative.
Right.
And that's why you'll find the most common debt in Kenya, before we get to the digital one, is the one that, you know, we are paid. Today's when? Today's 20th.
Yes.
Money, we're supposed to be paid today. So up to now, money hasn't come in. Why don't you give me 2,000? Then when money comes in tomorrow, I'll pay you. What have I done? Chances are that 2,000 is not even an emergency.
Right.
Probably I want to do something that actually can wait. So you realize I'm already spending money that is not here. So that's why I'm going back and saying it is the very core of debt is poor budgeting.
So Amos, you said people usually borrow for the wrong reasons, because like at that point in time, I need money to do something that might not even be that important, but I need money to do it.
Yes.
So then I'm going to end up borrowing.
Yes.
However, would you agree that there are some right reasons for borrowing? Is
Sure.
there such a situation
Yes.
as going into a bank to take out a loan for the right reasons, and
Yes.
what are the right reasons to
Yes.
take out a loan?
I must say, I have I have seen people borrow in terms of, let's say I'm in business, I have an LPO, I have gotten this LPO and needs to be serviced. I need to buy probably raw materials or stock to sell. However, that is business, a business loan, which if I look at the interest versus the profit I'll make, I can actually pay off the entire interest and sort out the, I can actually sort out the entire loan, but make my profits. I can actually say that is a good loan, but sometimes don't get used to it, you know, don't get used to it, because at some point you'll now get used to using profits elsewhere because you know you can borrow to do some business. That should happen, but not frequently. The worst kind of debt is the debt that actually you borrow to spend. It is actually the worst kind of deception, because in Swahili they say when you're borrowing it's dowry, it's a wedding,
Right.
but when you're paying is you're mourning. So we have to balance and actually say, ask myself, do I really need that loan? Chances are, if you ask yourself that question, do I need this loan, just 5 times, forget about the influence coming around, sit by yourself, you know, sit by yourself, go walking to a washroom, sit, ask yourself, do I need this
Get
loan?
some me time.
Yes, because,
Think.
and ask yourself, will I die if I don't get it? If there's an emergency, is there any other way of sorting it out? Because the more we get used, and debt is addictive. Debt is quite addictive. You borrow now, you'll be careless with what you have to know, because you know tomorrow I have a source of debt.
Right.
Yes, and this is why digital lending apps are thriving, because there's no much qualification, as long as I hear there's a way they can go into your social media, analyze, and see the kind of limit they can give you.
Right.
No any other analysis is done. So nobody's asking you questions, you know, on how you should be spending your money. And remember, even these lenders should understand the worst kind of disservice you can do to a man is lend them money that they can't pay you.
Right.
Yeah.
With that said, you said a lender or a financial institution, whether it's even your friend, the only way
Yes.
they'll give you money is if
Yes.
they can, when they look at you, they feel like
Yes.
you have the ability to pay back.
Yes.
But then also looking at the statistics that I started out by mentioning at the beginning of the show, the biggest number of people who are caught up in this debt cycle are the low-income earners,
Yes.
are the low-income households. So my question then is, what is the right income bracket to take out a loan? Someone who earns 5,000 shillings a month,
Yes.
and they have obligations as does everybody else, are they allowed to take out a loan? Or is that a preserve of someone who earns 100,000? What's your take when you say ability to pay back? And also, as someone, just to give me advice of, if you're getting 20,000, don't think about it. So what's the income bracket that people should be in before they consider walking into that financial institution, getting onto that digital mobile app loan to take out that loan?
Well, I can't put a cap on an income. If you can avoid debt, the better. I like reading stuff by Dave Ramsey, and he talks about debt being a normal thing. So why don't you choose to be weird?
Right.
And just avoid it at all costs? Because this is what happens. Whether I'm earning 5,000, you know, I can be earning 5,000, and I join a local chama. We do 500, I borrow 3,000. I buy what? I buy sufurias to be cooking pilau for weddings. And then in 2 months, I have paid my debt. You understand?
Right.
And then I could be earning 1,000,000 shillings. I get into a credit card that is not really useful.
Right.
I'm just spending money before I get it, and then I get myself into a car loan. You understand? So there's no really a way of capping this. The question should be, am I disciplined, and do I really need this loan?
Right.
Because at the end of the day, listen, if you get used to the habit of borrowing, and sometimes it's good to prepare ourselves for the worst, because I am yet to meet someone whose financial story has been a straight line. There are days that you'll be low, there are days that you'll be high. The key thing is to prepare for both scenarios, when you have a lot of money and when you have very little money, because you can actually not borrow your way out of debt. You
Right.
can't. Yes.
So you mentioned that the key thing to think about is, am I disciplined
Yes.
and do I need this money?
Yes.
You even advised me to go lock myself in a bathroom stall
Yes.
and just think about my life and ask myself several times,
Yes.
do I need this money?
Yes.
Do I need this money?
Yeah.
I've reached the conclusion, I actually need this money.
Mhm.
I've answered that question.
Uh-huh.
Before I go to take this loan, what other considerations should I put into place? Because I'm sure it's not just that. I've decided I need this money. I need to go out there to get this money. What other questions, what other thought process should I get into to avoid getting caught up in a debt trap and just having to, even my children, great-grandchildren, their great-grandchildren, having to pay up a loan that I
Yes.
took because I wanted to
That's-
live a good life?
That's very important because it takes me to what we call debt consolidation. For instance, do I have other debts that are outstanding? Because if I have other debts that are outstanding, can I look for a way, if I have been paying some, can I look for a way of seeing if I can get a top-up from any of them and see if I can actually, from that top-up, I can settle others and still remain with some money. Let me give you an example. I met someone who had a SACCO loan.
Okay.
Then they had gotten, because they in civil service, they had gotten themselves into pay slip loans from their local bank, and then they had gotten themselves into a Shylock. And one of the things that you realize out of the three, Shylock was actually the most costly one, because now the
Yes.
interest rate was
Right.
was quite high. So, and then they needed money for school fees. But then when we look at both of the three loans, you realize the one that he had taken for the SACCO was taken much earlier. So he had reduced it slowly, but he had also increased his shares, because the way SACCO's saving societies work, you continue to contribute. So over time we realized the top-up he would get from his SACCO would settle the Shylock and a bit of the bank loan. But then we realized, instead of settling the bank loan, just remain with to get rid of the bad one, but the top up, use it to pay school fees. Are we together? Because that particular moment, things were really bad. So we had to analyze the existing loans. Instead of jumping to newer ones, how can you adjust with the ones that are available? Then over time, he was able to come out of the one for the bank, and then he was remaining with one from the SACCO. So it's always good to ask yourself, which sources, which existing debts do I have,
Right.
and which is the cheapest to get it from? Because when we go now to these digital lending apps, they're very convenient. They don't need much approval, right? But they're also very costly. So other thing to consider is the convenience in terms of interest and how quickly you need to settle them. Yes.
But even with that said, and you're saying like, as much as you can stay out of debt and, you know, just think about, what do I need the most? Which one should I offset first? What if I'm a person who maybe has loans from 4 financial institutions,
Yes.
1 digital mobile lending app, 1 Shylock, 1 from my friend, 1 from my family? My point is, I have loans all over the place.
Yes.
But if you sit down with me, I'll tell you, I have a solid payment plan for all these loans that I've taken out, and I can take you through it. Is that such a bad thing? What's your take on that? Like someone who might be so knee deep in debt,
Yes.
but when you sit down with them, they'll be like, I'm fine with servicing them. I have a solid payment plan. Is there such a thing? Or at some point, will you be totally consumed with everything that's going on?
Well, for what I tell guys in that position, then you actually don't need me if you're doing that well.
Oh, we shouldn't be sitting
You
here.
understand? And the thing is, it's always good to be realistic, especially in terms of debt.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, let's look at our working years. I normally like talking about the donkey, the dog and the man. And they all had equal number of years. So in that story, I talk about by the time you start your first job to the time you retire, those are your donkey years. Those years are around 20 years. By the time you're around 30 to 50, that's the time you're active. So if you're going to spend those 20 years just in a debt cycle, you borrow money for consumption and you're just going in cycles, think about your dog years.
Right.
That is when you're backing because you're regretting the decisions that you made earlier.
Right.
And I like telling people, at the age of 26, I was on my first car loan. which I actually regret up to date, because that time where I used to live, plots used to do very poorly. So there was a plot going for 200,000. Right now is worth 6 million. You understand?
Right.
So I wish someone advised me then and told me, why don't you buy a smaller car worth about 300,000 instead of taking a loan of 800,000 for a short duration. You understand? So if you're busy, even in those loans, yes, you have capacity to borrow, but is that the best you can do? Is that the best you can do with your money? Just paying debts that you have actually consumed. So if you feel you're okay, that's fine, because behavior change is the hardest part of what we do as coaches. Yes.
But even as we talk about defaulting on loans, banks talking about we gave out this much in loans, we are like there's this many bad loans in the country. When you walk into some financial institutions, even before you take out that loan, they'll tell you, oh, don't worry, your loan is insured. Why then should I even worry about it? Like in the event that I don't pay, my loan is insured. How does that insurance work? And then at the end of the day, why does the bank end up coming after me? Is that even a real thing?
You know what they say, that the man who dies, all his debts are paid. All the debts are paid. What that means is, if someone is in debt and they die, nobody can come to the grave and pay and claim it. That's why banks will insure against death. Others go against personal accidents, so that the income that you used to earn can actually replace and pay your loan. That's the bit. But in terms of defaulting, it is after follow-up, and sometimes they have provisions for writing off debt. But in terms of you and I, if I'm the bank and Ingrid, you've taken money in my bank, I'll follow you up.
You'll follow me until I pay you back that money.
Yes.
Okay, even as we talk about all these things, as obvious as it may sound, there are people who've lived with debt from the age of 25 and could be in their 50s, and they're surviving. They're walking these streets, you know, living one day at a time. They're making it. They're in debt, but they're making it. So tell me, Amos, what are the consequences of being, why is it such a bad thing? Even as they talk about these numbers, I mean, I'm surviving. Either way, my life is going on. I still go to the bank, I still get the money, I'm knee deep in debt. What are the consequences?
Excuse me. You know, the funny thing is, and personally I believe that, because when those of us who've studied economics, you realize that the functions of banks, especially the banking sector, part of their function is to offer sound financial advice. And that should always happen, because the moment I'm walking around owing so many institutions money, and I'm listed in a credit reference bureau, and I actually don't care about it, there's a problem. There's a societal problem. Because at the end of the day, the pain of debt should be felt by both the lender and the borrower. So the consequences of this are actually really serious if we were to look at it seriously, because you realize that is why, if I'm employed here and I'm in debt, I've been borrowing from Peter to pay Paul, what will happen if, let's say, a Shylock guy walks into our HR office? The first thing I'll do is to clear and to save my job, right? So I'll quickly borrow from elsewhere and sort my job, isn't it? But am I still in debt? I'm still in debt.
Yeah, you're still in debt.
I'm still in debt.
You're still in
so
debt.
The challenge comes in, if you as the lender, especially financial institutions, let's sit down with our clients. And I normally tell that to lending institutions, saving societies, banks. Sit down with this person, help them understand, do I really need the money? And you'll be shocked, about 30 to 40% the times that people go to borrow, they actually don't need the money. Yes, and I like going back to the issue of, if I am in business and I am in debt, and I've met so many people who come to me, they're in serious debt. Suppliers or even government or counties have not paid the suppliers, and then this person sits and they are stuck because they are actually looking at one source of income. So it's always good to get alternative sources of income. And I think I shared this in the last time I was here. There was a time personally I did not have cash flow, and I had to borrow one of the mirrors from my wife, and I actually sat and wrote 5 things that can actually make me 500 shillings a day. And then I split the list into the things that need capital and the things that actually need my appearance and my skills. And I realized the ones that needed my skills just needed me to show up. And slowly I started feeding the businesses that needed capital as little as 3,000. And then over time you realize you can actually avoid debt. Okay? So it is a serious thing because debt can actually kill you in terms of your health. We've seen that. And that's why, again, the society today, if I am struggling in debt and I am a man and we don't talk about money, it's very easy for me to go into a depression because I will not tell my family I cannot afford.
Right.
The thing is, tell your family, you know what? Don't tell them you can't afford. Ask them, how can we afford this? Because this is what it is. Do you think we should get loans? And sometimes, even sharing with your family, they will tell you, you know what? We don't have to take a loan. Yes. Let me walk to school. Are we together? Let me start selling things in school or carrying snacks that I can sell in school. That time you're having that discussion with your kids. And it becomes easier. So we don't have to really borrow. Remember, we said, what about that? We said it is, if you can, it's normal, isn't it?
Right.
So let's
just
choose
be
to
weird.
Just be weird.
Okay, Amos, when someone tells you debt can kill you, or when someone tells you something can kill you, isn't that like the most extreme thing? Like, stay away from it. When they tell you the repercussion of it is death, then really, I don't see is there any good side to debt? So my thing then is, before we wrap up, if I was sitting right here in front of you and I've come to you for advice and I'm telling you, Amos, I'm stuck.
Yes.
I have all these things I have to do. I have all these, like, I'm stuck, Amos. I really, really need to take a loan, but I don't know what to do.
Yes.
1, 2, 3, what would you tell me about taking loans and debt?
Like I said, the problem is not that debt.
Right.
The problem is going back to how did you get yourself into that debt. If we can deal with the core of that, because let me tell you something. Let's take, for instance, a simple budget. A simple budget simply says, if you're paying rent, pay below 20% of your income.
Right.
And Ingrid is here paying 40% of her income on rent.
Yeah.
So before I sort you out, I'll tell you, hey Ingrid, listen, there's a place called Eastlands. You can actually go there, get an apartment in the top floor and do half of the rent you're doing. Or just get a roommate who you can actually split bills. So for me, I'm not in a, you see, debt is actually just a tip of the iceberg.
Right.
These things go deeper. And even it goes to what motivates you to make money. You see, there are two things that actually motivate people to make money. That is fear and greed.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah.
Fear in terms of, I don't know what tomorrow holds. I want my kids to have a better life than I did. Okay? So that will motivate me to actually either borrow, ill-advised borrowing, and then you find yourself into debt. So really, I'm not in a hurry to sort out the debt part. I want to go deeper and find out what is the core, what is the problem, where did all this start? Yes. Because sometimes it could also be your background. You're used to your parents borrowing to pay your school fees, borrowing to buy food, borrowing. But you see, that needs to change.
Right.
And that's why now we need to go deeper and search within ourselves where is the real problem.
Amos, I feel like this was a timely conversation that needed to be had, especially because of how deep and serious the problem is going by the statistics.
Yes.
So I'm so grateful that you made time to come join us and break it down for us. I'm shivering right now at the thought of debt, and I don't think I'll ever even consider it. Who's trying to die because of debt?
But that will help you because now you'll not easily take loans.
I'm not easily. I'm not taking loans, period.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for coming to the show,
Thank
Amos.
you.
It's always a pleasure. So we've come to the end of the show, but I'll leave you with a financial tip. Make a list of all your debt. Start with your smallest debt, like for example, money you owe a friend, and move to your largest, like for example, your mortgage. Make a note of which debts can be paid off within months and which could be paid off in a few years. These are the debts that you'll want to focus on the most, so you can cross them off of your list and get closer to living debt-free. Look for the debts that you could possibly consolidate to give you one lower monthly payment instead of several different debts to pay off. Consolidating your bills to pay off multiple debts with a single monthly payment could help you lower your overall monthly bills and reach your savings goals more quickly. That's why we wrap it up for tonight on Eye on the Money. But do keep the conversation going on our social media pages at Metropole TV KE on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. I've been your host, Ingrid Nantege. Have a very beautiful evening.